Hey everybody, I'm Nick Layton.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by the second annual Catskill Cuisine Festival. Visit catskill-cuisine.com to learn more and buy tickets.
Culture and Flavor is a podcast about food and culture centered in Black and Indigenous foodways. Hosted by myself, Zella Palmer, right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Each episode features high vibrational conversations with cultural bearers, chefs, farmers, scholars, barbecue pitmasters, and more. Where there is flavor, there is history. Join me on Culture and Flavor and all of my guests as we share stories that will have you praise dancing, cooking, conjuring, and inspiring your culinary journey. Welcome to another episode of Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. Today, I am so excited to interview Kudzai Bingepinge. He is a co-founder and the chief product officer at African Flavor Labs. He expertly navigates the intersection of culinary innovation and cultural heritage. His role at African Flavor Labs is pivotal in pioneering strategies to introduce African gastronomy, African culinary innovations to a global audience. As a partner of the executive director of gastronomy at King's Crawl in Johannesburg, Kudzai is at the forefront of integrating indigenous ingredients with sustainable practices. His work is aimed at elevating African cuisine on the international stage while honoring the continent's diverse culinary traditions. Africa is the future and Africa is the now. Welcome, Kudzai. Welcome to Culture and Flavor.
Thank you so much, Zella. It's such a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to having this chat. And thanks for that intro. It reminds me that I do need to figure out some point where I can take a vacation, if there's anything else.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. On today's episode, y'all, we're going to be talking about salt. We're going to be talking about the legacy of salt in Africa and how during antiquity, salt was highly valued. The Moors once traded salt for gold. Abyssinia salt was used as coins, but sadly, enslaved Africans and Native Americans were forced to work in salt mines in the U.S., in factories and mines. And one of our most famous African-American heroes at 9 years old worked in the salt furnaces of West Virginia, Booker T. Washington. I would love for you to talk about just the history and legacy of salt in Africa, particularly in Southern Africa, which is where you're from in Zimbabwe.
Yes. No, thanks a lot for that. And indeed, salt has played and run hand in hand with the human story. Of course, since I think we came into existence, it's a mineral we don't produce naturally ourselves. And so it's something that we've been and needed to be connected to in order to survive as humans. And if you look at the story of salt starting in North Africa and the trade, of course, across the deserts, this would have been something that I guess would have been worth its weight in gold. I'm sure that might be one of the sources of that quote itself. But from the Southern African context, salt has been also a source of where empires or cause of where empires would have originated. One being, one archaeological theory being that Great Zimbabwe at some point when it started to decline, a lot of it also had to do with the erosion or diminishing stores of salt in that particular area and people starting to move. That is one theory that we see quite a bit that's coming out of Southern Africa. Then there is, of course, the Lake Mahadi, which is out towards the Kalahari Desert and where actually Ngom, the salt brand that we brought to the US. That's where it takes its name from. But this is a prehistoric lake, almost the size of Switzerland itself, that existed quite some time back, of course. And this is also the source of where it is believed that humanity began its migration around the world as well too. So when we look at salt, it's at least for us, we're that much connected to it. Our story is very much a salt story. The one that I'd like to really harp on about and we'll get into it later on because there's so many stories around salt that, in this journey we've been able to sort of collect. But the one that I really do enjoy speaking about, which I think you may have your hand on as well too, is the sacred Sutini salt or Baleni salt.
Listen, I had that last night. I had it last night. Listen. And my son even made pasta and he put, it is divine, y'all. I mean, it's smoky goodness. And what I love about each one of you, the salts that you all sent me is that it's chef inspired, that you definitely, I could feel your, just your input in the development of the salt, and it is really sacred. And I was so excited to open up the package. The packaging is beautiful. The stories that are on the packaging. I even brought one with me, so I would. And we had a funny conversation yesterday when we were talking, you and I, and just about the importance of learning language and acknowledging, indigenous languages and making sure that we pronounce things correctly. But I tried so many times to pronounce, and my click, I don't have the click, but, I would love for you to talk more about the salts and definitely to explain in more detail the meaning of Noom. Am I doing it right? I messed it up, but I honor y'all. I honor y'all.
No, we see you, and actually, what the truth is, there's no, it's always just the intention, and it's the clicks are a very hard thing for anyone outside of Southern Africa to say, especially if they didn't grow up saying it. So we're being a bit cheeky in trying to get people to say it. And the variations that come out are just nothing short of amazing and amusing. And that's the whole point. If you look at the Khoisan people as well, too, they are naturally just happy folks. They don't take a lot of things personally. The spirit and the heart that they bring towards people, humanity in their communities is really, really one that's there's love there and it's playful. So I think when we see everyone trying and, blushing or struggling to say it, it's so welcoming, and we take quite a lot of humor from it. But those that get it right, I mean, hats off. For us, it's truly just the intention. So thanks a lot for trying.
Indeed. So tell us more about the meaning behind the name, because it has such a powerful meaning from reading the background story on the actual packaging of the artisanal salt.
Ngum itself is a word that denotes potent healing energy. And it is almost it's I guess a state of mind that the Khoisan achieve after they've engaged in some form of a ritual dance, which they do regularly to try and bring their communities together and to heal their communities. Through that ritual dance, this elevated state, if you will, which we'd call Ngum, is what helps them sort of transcend what it is that's ailing them as a society or as people. And through that, see something, I guess, the deeper meaning of things, and helps them to reconnect with themselves and their communities. So we like that name because of that, right? I think we wanted to be very intentional about what kind of name we're putting. We did look at many, many variations, but this one really stuck out to us because of the nature and the character of this beautiful people of Southern Africa. But as well to just the idea that through this salt, which also is sourced from the region, that Lake Mahadikadi or Kalagati, where the Kalahari Desert is. We all have some common point of reference, a common place where we can start to understand and in some way achieve our own flavorful moon, if you will, or a new perspective and understanding about what humanity is. And through this mineral, if you will, come together around a table at a cocktail bar and whatnot. So for us, that's why we chose Moon. And you'll see it, each part of the logo itself is very, very much intentionally put together to reflect that. So if you look at it, of course, it's egg-shaped, and it denotes a number of things. First, it's depending on which part of the jars you're looking at, it does have what we say we try to go for this hypnotic effect that almost looked like dancing, right? A community of people dancing, and that was our way of trying to interpret this ritual coming together that the Khoisan use. But also the ostrich egg is a symbol, of course, of prosperity, of new growth and wealth, everything that we all aspire for, but also a store of water for the Khoisan in the deserts. They'll usually take an ostrich egg and put water in it and use it as a flask, if you will. But finally, it is also, in a second sort of deeper meaning, it's a fingerprint. And a fingerprint that denotes sort of our collective identities, that they're unique, but at the same time, we all come together as one. So we were trying to really get a whole bunch of things off in just that one icon there. And it's been interesting seeing how people have interpreted it as we've been going on our global adventures, if you will.
You can definitely tell the love and intention that you all have put in this. And, when I read about you and your co-founders, it's such a beautiful story. And I would love for you to share it with our listeners on just how you all decided to start this brand.
Yeah, sure. So my other co-founder is our Kone. She's our CEO. And a bit of background, both Awa and I met in Switzerland, working in financial services and the reinsurance side of things. But we were both looking after various portfolios on the continent. Awa looking after West Africa, Anglophone and Francophone, and then I was looking after Southern Africa. So we met there, but we also then connected on a deeper level through our love for food. I started up my supper club, Oral Tradition, which is just no more than 14 people at a table, and really integrate storytelling along with the dishes that I put together. And so I joined, and for the longest time had been saying, we should do a restaurant or something, and I didn't want to do one. And then fast forward a few years, COVID happens. We're having a catch-up call. She's in Lagos somewhere, about to get her hair done. And I was back in Zurich, and we just started kicking around ideas and said, why don't we just roll the dice? Let's try something, and let's do something that we can actually share with many people. And at that point, we were like, well, let's look at ingredients, because at least that's something that, we can source from around the continent. We can share, we can learn a few stories and make an adventure out of it. And then, hopefully bring that to the world, and the world will at least taste Africa beyond the Oral Tradition table. And so that's how it kicked off. And here we are several years later.
Brilliant. I want to talk about, since you talked about, your pop-up dinners that you did, I want to talk about, you became the executive director of King's Crawl in Johannesburg. And I want to talk about African gastronomy, specifically to our listeners, and the power of African gastronomy, knowing how many diverse cultures that are in Africa, and how it is so important to push African gastronomy, or even just how powerful that word is, African gastronomy, considering that it is one of the most underrated diverse cuisines in the world. And it is always, I think about just here in New Orleans or in the South, the majority of cooks, when they were all enslaved and they were Black folks. But yet, when a lot of historians talk about Southern cuisine, African is always the last. But we know that this is, there's so much political and, discrimination towards that. And we are trying to do our best to lift that up as scholars and people of African descent, to make sure that Indigenous and African people are at the forefront of that, because they were the ones doing the cooking and cultivating the land. So I would love for you to talk about African gastronomy, and particularly Southern African gastronomy, because, in Europe and the U.S., and obviously for many reasons, because the majority of us who come from descendants of enslaved people, our palate is West African, because that's where we are, or Central African, correct? So we're exposed to, an average person is exposed to fufu or, egusi and things of that nature, or suya, and even still there's some that aren't, but the flavor is there. The cultural memory, the food memory is definitely there. And if you eat a gumbo, you definitely have eaten okra stew somewhere in West or Central Africa. So I would love for you to talk about the relevance and the importance of the now of pushing African gastronomy to the forefront, as well as the food products that, as your salt blends are pushing the narrative forward, and how rich and beautiful Africa is.
Sure. That's a tough question. It's a beautiful one as well, too. If I, at least from my perspective, try to distill what African gastronomy could look like or be interpreted in, it's about the exploration of the ingredients, the traditional techniques used to work with those ingredients, the stories, the historical context that's fed into the dishes that are enjoyed across this very vast and diverse part of Africa, and then as well too overlaying the impact of what do you call it? I don't know if it's the Columbian exchange in that sense, but like just the interaction of new cultures that arrived here in this region. I mean, the Portuguese was being the first, and then the Dutch, then having the British and many other cultures as well, to coming in the modern time, but as well to some of the impacts that we had of trade via the Indian Ocean. So there's historical evidence of porcelain and Japanese type of artworks found here at Mapungu, where one of the first sort of sites where we did have quite a strong collection of organized society. Clearly, there's been a lot of interaction between Africa and the rest of the world, even before Vasco da Gama and the folks around the Cape of Good Hope. So for us, I think that gastronomy is a very complex, sometimes very painful one to explore, because with it comes the, trying to capture or to spend a little bit more time understanding what it is that we have discarded because it was deemed unworthy, or did not have the same value as, say, lobster or some other ingredient that might have been imported here. So a large chunk of what we're doing with King's Crow and the work that I do with various groups in the region is about recapturing that oral tradition, cataloging it, looking at the old techniques that were used, having a think about what could we do with it today, and then trying to translate it into language that we understand today without discarding everything else that's led up to it. That's really in a sense of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen a couple of interviews with you where, you went into, some of the villages, and I would love for you to talk about just your, experiences as far as, making sure that you work with Indigenous people and hearing their voices, because, colonization has done severe damage on us globally as a people, right? As well as slavery. And, oftentimes the village or the hood or, places where, there are looked down upon, or there's a push away from agriculture, for obvious reasons, because, many want their children to go on to college and things of that nature, which is great. However, we understand that African women are the largest percentage of farmers in Africa. And, and we also understand that land is being bought up in Uganda and, and all parts of Africa where, different neo-colonial powers are buying up land to secure their food resources. And so, I'm curious to know, just as you go on these and you secure and, work with Indigenous people to in different parts of South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, what are your, how do you stay true to making sure that your salt, the artisanal brands that you all have and the different lines of salts that you all have tells that story and gives back to those who are indigenous to the land?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a very important part of what we're trying to do at African Flavor Labs through Moon. The first part around it is around not just looking for salt, but looking for salt that has a story, and then building a proposition that aligns with that story, and then taking it to market with a clear expectation set that what you get is a sustainably sourced product, which we do not intend on betraying. And I think we're at a stage now where, as a people, we have the means, the capacity, and the ability to start to do these things. And it takes courage, because these are very slow-moving endeavors that maybe even might outlive us, but we have to start somewhere. So the one that I was talking about, for example, the Sacred Sutini salt, I really love it because this one is sourced from a hot spring in South Africa, one of the last hot springs in South Africa, where it's the custodians of it is 30 women, and they are using a 2,000-year-old tradition or method of extracting the salt. There's a lot of customary process that takes place, recognition of your environment, asking permission to enter the site. Men aren't allowed to enter unless they are unwell or have been given permission. And there's this process that has been protected, not only by the people, but as well too by the governments, who are now recognizing the importance of these things. So for us, when we go in, this is the kind of product we want to support, because there is value that they should be able to glean from this process, and we want to support it. And if we do that across multiple sources of salt, it doesn't really matter that we run out of one particular salt. It's okay. We expect it to run out because it's only harvested 2 months in the year. And we want to be able to tell that story and have folks respect that. But you might have something else at a different season that was harvested. So it's an opportunity for customers to try different variants of salt, different blends over time, and move in alignment with nature, and not us trying to force nature to move in alignment with us. So that's kind of really the ethos of NOM, but also the ethos of how we actually go and try and identify which I guess partners to work with, and what story we want to help preserve. There are many, and we just have to pick and push as much as we can on the ones that we feel we can best tell the story, if you will, or support the story.
Beautiful. Starting an African business, a business in Africa, has its beautiful moments, but it also has its challenges. I'm sure it wasn't easy for you all to start your brand. And, I have many African friends who either go home or have dreams of going home and bringing, the either grains, like, I think about Chef Pierre Chiam and how he has fonio in Senegal, and how he has put that on the market, or Chef Michael Elegbede, and how he in Lagos and how he has done a beautiful job of, really sharing Yoruba culture and Yoruba cuisine in Itan. And so, but then I have other friends, who have started businesses, and, we, even if you went to business school, to prepare you for export, import, some of the challenges that you might, go through, that perhaps doesn't happen in other places. How, what are some of the challenges that you might have had, or some of the successes? We can always start with positive, the successes of being in the continent and, putting you all in the global market.
Wow. Successes. To be honest, and I think the very fact that we got this brand and we saw it loaded onto a ship and heading out to the US has probably got to have been one of the most fulfilling, satisfying experiences I've ever had. Why? Because what you learn in B school, putting things on Excel and modeling and forecasting, how things are going to play out, making assumptions for uncertainty, etc. That's the insurer in me. But nothing can prepare you for the vagaries of trying to put together what is really a virtual manufacturing company. I was based in the US. I'm based in Switzerland. I spend a lot of time in Africa. Our production is done in Cape Town. We source from anywhere on the continent. We have to get licensing. We have to get local partners to help us source and negotiate, but we don't have all these things have been part of the journey. And while difficult, also part of the joy. It's a hard thing for me to say. I'll say the brand and the product heading to the US was very, very satisfying. But I'd be lying if I said that every obstacle overcome did not fill me with a sense of confirmation that this is purposeful work and is worth it. So yes, the entire thing has been successful. It's also been quite satisfying having a partner that has the same mentality. That long term, we're not in any rush. We're not going to take any shortcuts, no matter how frustrating it is. We are doing this. We want to produce every piece that's in Africa. If we truly run out of options, then let's look elsewhere. But our heart is on producing and adding value here and not being an extractive a company that's just going to, it might have been easier to do so, but that's not what we're trying to do. So to see that this business exists and is in line with these values that we have and is supporting many families, even in its small stage, sure, that makes everything worthwhile. That it's hard for me to say, my goodness, this was tough. Every piece has been quite satisfying and character building as well too. I think we now have some muscles built from having to do this.
I love this conversation, y'all. We'll be back in minutes after a word from our advertisers. We thank you for joining Culture and Flavor and supporting our wonderful podcast and listening in to Kudzai. And thank you all for listening. And we'll be back in a few moments.
Gather your friends and family at the second annual Catskill Cuisine Festival, presented by the Sullivan Catskills Visitors Association, Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, and Resorts World Catskills. Mark your calendars for a flavor-packed weekend from May 10th to May 12th. Experience the fusion of phenomenal food and electrifying entertainment. Rub shoulders with your favorite Food Network personalities, including Andrew Zimmern, Michael Simon, Scott Conant, Marcus Samuelson, Jeffrey Zakarian, Anne Burrell, Melba Wilson, and distinguished international chefs by LaBelle Farms. Kick off the festivities with Friday's star-studded golf tournament and evening reception. Saturday heats up with free tastings, thrilling live demos, music, and family activities, culminating with a gourmet dinner hosted by celebrity chefs. And on Sunday, celebrate Mother's Day with a special celebrity-curated brunch. Tickets for this celebration are selling like hotcakes. Visit catskill-cuisine.com to grab your pass for this unforgettable weekend in the picturesque Catskills. See you there.
Okay, we're back. I want to talk about the spiritual aspect of salt. When I think about antiquity, or even just, in American horror movies, or, things that some, not even just horror movies, but things our grandmothers did, where they put salt in front of the door because they didn't want people to bad energy to come through, or put salt over their shoulders. I mean, there were so many, little traditions that I think we, don't talk about enough, and the power of salts, and the smelling salts when you're at the funeral and somebody passes out and they put the salts under their nose. And I remember being in Morocco and just, and smelling those smelling salts. And it had me thinking about just my own childhood and how we have been removed from the, just the antiquity of salt. And now it's more commercialized in the U.S. And growing up in Chicago, and you pass the expressway, as we say in Chicago, and there's this big, huge advertisement of Morton salt on a building, and then it says specifically iodized salt, right? And then all of a sudden, we're seeing our elders, have issues with salt, and I can't, when they get to a certain age, they can't have salt. And it makes you wonder about the commercialization of salt in the U.S. And when I tried your salts yesterday, I just fell in love with them. I needed them in my cabinet. And it was so much fun to just, and I just felt this huge connection with what you all are doing. And so I want to talk about the spirituality of salt and reclaiming the stories of salt, since you're a storyteller.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about this salt journey, right? Because the spirituality, you see a lot of commonalities in it. And of course, I'm no spiritual healer, so I would pause at some point when I think I'm beyond what I can speak about. But what I do and have seen through my travels across the region, let's just say Southern Africa, from Angola all the way out to the Seychelles, if we're looking at it from a SADC perspective, which is, I guess, the Southern African Development Community. There are very common uses for salt, particularly when it comes to the idea of cleansing and protection. As well, too, you can see that story is not something that was developed in isolation, but there is a strong belief behind salt as a cleansing, as a healing, and as well as a protection agent, if you will. The one, again, as well, if you look at the sacred Sutini salt of Valeni, this one is one that they, quite often you'll see healing baths being prepared, or teas drunk with a little bit of that sacred Sutini salt in there, because of the strong sort of spiritual process that takes place, or at least reverence that takes place when one goes to actually harvest it. It starts off with bringing coins to the Motswiri tree, which is an ironwood tree in the area. And it's almost asking for permission from this tree, which has been a custodian for that area for ages. And once that permission is given, then you can actually go out and start to collect the soil from this hot spring that is laden with the salt, and then take it through this 2,000-year-old process, which has very much been passed down from generation to generation, in order to preserve this idea of the potency of the idea of the salt as a healing and a protection agent. So these are the stories that you see quite a bit throughout the region. Of course, many used in traditional rites as well too. But that one, I would almost say that I'm not qualified to go into too much details on that piece. So I normally would stay away from it. But I would confirm that it's a very central part of spiritual practice in the region.
Absolutely. And, it goes way back. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci's painting, Last Supper, Judas is shown overturning the salt cellar in front of him. I mean, there's so many different stories all over the world, from ancient times about salt being, having some type of spiritual significance. But I want to go back to kind of what we were talking about, African gastronomy. And, I would love in my lifetime and our lifetime to see one day where airlines work with African chefs, African food brands, to make sure that when we hop on plane to go to Nairobi, to go to Lagos, to go to Johannesburg, that the food is indigenous to that country. If I go to India, I know I'm going to eat, and I'm going to get on the plane. I know that there's going to be meals prepared that are Indian, right? And if I go to China,
right.
So I would love to see, Delta, United, British Airways, all of these, major companies work with chefs to make sure that the food is an introduction to the journey that we as patrons or customers are about to go on, and immediately we feel, Africa and welcoming and inviting us in.
Yeah. I 100% share that vision. I wouldn't even call it a hope. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen sooner than we think, because there's a large group of folks. You're speaking about Chef Elegbete and Chef Tiam on Fonio, right? Like, I think there's now, you can see a groundswell of interest from chefs now looking at their ingredients and applying the same rigor that they've applied delivering French cuisine or Italian cuisine, etc., to their own offerings. She's been as a big inspiration of mine. Like, she just stays true to really sharing it with the rest of the world, and the world is listening. And I think it's only a matter of time before folks like the airlines and hotels and whatnot start to really think seriously about what they're putting on the menus. For me, the biggest frustration, and I say it so many times, is going to the Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe and seeing very Eurocentric dishes being churned out. It's starting to change, but I think it will only be accelerated when more folks who grew up learning how to prepare those dishes, how to work with those ingredients, start to get an opportunity to present them in the kitchens and with those airlines. It's coming. I think it's really just a matter of time, and almost the hope would be, and that's what we're trying to do with Prowle as well, is to get so innovative with African cuisine that it behooves our competitors in the region to start to think about it. In the region, I mean, within Joburg or whatnot, to really start saying, oh, we need to take this seriously and actually integrate some of this. Because to me, that's the movement. It's not about one entity. It's about more people starting to look at this and really applying themselves so that this can become the standard. And I really think it's a matter of time, but it does take us, taking the first step and having the courage to take those blows that do come when critics come and say that this is not what I tried in France. Of course, you're not in France. This is what we have here. And to say it with that pride, right? And I think in time, the business community will start to embrace and see the value in that as well too.
Agreed. And, I think there's definitely a deep historical connection when I think about African Americans and Southern Africans. When I think about the history of South Africa, the history of Zimbabwe, I can remember my parents, they were part of the Free South Africa Chicago movement. And I remember when Bishop Desmond Tutu came to Chicago and we had the first Black mayor, Harold Washington, who, had this big rally. And there's a picture of my dad, with this big fur hat, the kind of like the Run DMC era. And I remember him being in New York, hat stolen. And he's like, wow, I don't know why they stole my hat. I'm like, Daddy, you finally have style. So there's been this long, history. And I just remember them, protesting, getting arrested, and I was a little girl at the time, but it left an impact on me. And I, just continue to encourage those relationships to build because, it's deeply personal for all of us and how you all stand up for injustices. So that connection is deep. I just wanted to say that, and opening up to the African American market as well, because it's we have history. We have we definitely have history.
Yeah, we definitely do, and I think it moves beyond. I guess the ingredients are there for us to continue to learn what those experiences have been across since slavery. I think they might have been. Then there's always a group that looks at things very separate, but okra, as you spoke to, came from here, and there's been so many things that have been shared between the continent and the people, both in struggle, both in cuisine, and many other elements from the economic side, etc. That for at least for me, I speak for myself, and I think even the hope is that this brand is one of those that brings us all together, and we can share in something. I would love to see barbecue season. I was teasing our the last time saying, I think there was a couple years ago, there's this whole thing trending, hot girl summer. And I was calling it hot grill summer. And the hope of seeing folks using the smoked salt in the US in barbecue season, or at cookouts, and what do you call it when you're doing the smoked meats and that kind of thing, just as something that connects us, right? That's a word that's used in most villages across Southern Africa for millennia. And this is something that we're bringing to the US to say, here's a little bit of to taste and to share with everyone there. But we all know that it comes from a source that we all come from. This is what we're hoping to achieve, and hope that this also ferments or catalyzes further collaboration and conversation across oceans, if you will. I think we've been together, and we should come back together.
Now, barbecue is my language. I love some barbecue.
Yeah.
I think I told you that we came in second. I wrote Ed Mitchell's Barbecue. He's a 75-year-old barbecue pit master from Wilson, North Carolina, legend, inducted into the Barbecue Hall of Fame. And I had the humbled opportunity to write his cookbook. And we came in second in the World Cookbook Fair, the Gourmand Awards in Saudi Arabia. And the cookbook that came in first was South African barbecue, about South African barbecue. So we weren't mad, we were just like, it's all love, for the culture, But, you talked about connectivity, and one of the connectivities that I see is through music. Social media is also, I think it's expediting a lot of our culture, and it's this huge, trade that's happening, where you're seeing culture from Afro-diasporic cultures all around the world sharing culture through food, through music, and just that quickly. I'm a piano, I remember, because I'm from Chicago, so house music is legendary. And I always wonder, was it from the Free South Africa movement that the language or the music was shared, because it's really strong in South Africa. And I'm a piano, and then you see, Afro beats artists in Nigeria taking a bit of I'm a piano. I mean, it's a lot of, exchanging of music and culture. And I think about Marcus Roberts. I saw an interview recently. He's an African-American jazz pianist who once said, the reason jazz music is very sophisticated is because of a spiritual need to generate an art form that would give them aesthetic solutions to the gigantic problems that you have facing adulthood throughout your life. This is what it causes to be available. We need the music of Duke Ellington, Beethoven, Bach, Monk. We will have jazz because it is enduring. It faces the neutral gravitation to anarchy very well. And when you became executive director of King's Crawl and in Johannesburg, you all have played jazz there with music. What does jazz mean to you? Why is it important for you, for King's Crawl to play jazz in Johannesburg?
Before I even start, I'm going to ask for that quote later on. That quote, because that's really powerful.
That is a deep quote. It's a deep quote. My friend in Brazil, Pachi, she said, "Oh my God, I need a moment with this quote."
No, it's not fair. You can't just drop it like that and then expect us to just not say, hold on 1 second. What did you just say? No, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And I want to sit with it for a little bit. But, and also following that I guess the Gourmand entry, I think it's only right that you make your way to South Africa and try and have a braai. But for us at King's Crawl, that was something we were very, very intentional about as well, too, was to say, well, what does a regal space look like today? When we were saying the Crawl would have been a meeting place, Shaka Zulu would have had this palatial place, Monomotapa up in Zimbabwe would have, Njinga in Angola would have had a space. All these royal heroes, royal people of consequence would have had a space where cultures came together and intermingled and enjoyed an African experience without losing who they were. They brought themselves to this place and enjoyed it. For us, why we were really inspired by jazz was because it's, piano and everything has really taken off, but it's built on the backs of some really powerful artists from around the continent, right? Like there's been pieces that have been built, whether it's through the house or Afro beats, etc. Fela Kuti and all those folks have contributed to the sounds that we're seeing now. for us, the jazz story, particularly in South Africa, was also one of defiance. You know, if you think of you, Masela, you know, as a bastion of that time, we felt that these folks need a space that honors them as well, but also reflects the innovative approach that we're trying to take with our gastronomy. We are very free flowing. We cook from spirit, the same way jazz is a very spiritually anchored a form of music, if you will. We've drawn on so many of those things, and there's nothing better than sitting at the crowd now and seeing some of the house bands or the artists that join completely spaz out. You know that moment when jazz is being played and you wonder whether that person is still here or they've gone elsewhere. That's what we wanted to create, because that's when you see people move beyond. As they watch this, they really drop all their inhibitions and they just immerse. And jazz has this profound ability to do that. And that's what we're also trying to do in the kitchen as well, too. So some of the stuff we're cranking out is really mischievous, but it's driven by this spirit as well, too, to be playful, to go where the spirit leads you and let something present itself that folks experience almost in an ephemeral sense. And so that's why we started to play it. And we felt that this is also something that would be understood across many geographies as well.
This was such a beautiful conversation, a high level conversation. I mean, I could talk. I want you to let our listeners know on where they can follow you. We want to support, because y'all, when I tell y'all, like, listen, you put that the sacred zucchini salt in a pasta, you know, so like you said, a barbecue is on it popping. It's on it popping.
It is happening. and I think the smoked one as well too is perfect for y'all in the winter. You know, when you can't be out there barbecuing, all you just need to do is pan-sear that steak, throw on that smoked salt, and you have the flavor of a braai, pretty much, in your plate. So go crazy, and we challenge folks to do so. But where to reach us for Noom, definitely it's N_UM Origins. That's the Instagram. So N_UM Origins. For King's Kraal, it's King's Kraal, KRAALJHB. For Johannesburg, that's our Instagram. And then for me, it's plated_poetry. And there, across any one of those platforms, you get a lot of the same, in the sense that we're exploring, we're cooking, and we're storytelling.
We can't wait to support you, you know, and I want to also thank your co-founder, who's lovely, you know, and just, we are very proud of the work that you all are doing. You all are definitely reclaiming and pushing the African, the beauty of Africa forward. And thank you for all of the work that you all are doing. And we want to see more of it. And I'm sure, you know, the people that you work with, the farmers and the salt, the purveyors of salt are proud of you all as well. And I'm sure they also thank you all for telling their stories.
Well, Zella, thank you so much. And definitely it's for the farmers, it's for the grandmas, it's for those stories that we are now re-embracing and sharing, because I think this is where that commonality, that opportunity for us to taste our origins will be found. And we don't just mean it in a flavor sense. I think even spiritually, there's an opportunity for us to really re-engage and come together. Thank you for your support and for giving us this platform to try and tell our story. And we're really hoping that through it, much more will come, and it will inspire many more to take the step that they know they need to take and to remember themselves. So thank you so much. And I really do appreciate it.
Thank y'all. And thank y'all for joining Culture and Flavor. We'll see y'all on the next episode. Culture and Flavor is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org.
Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we're really digging. It's called Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio. Every week, they travel the world to find the most fascinating stories about food, including children who harvest cod tongues after school in Norway and a detective who tracks down food thieves. And on Milk Street Radio, you can always find the unexpected. The comedian who ranks apples using an elaborate 100-point system, the secret history of grocery stores, and how to eat your way through Italy. They also interview the most beloved names in food like Jacques Pepin, Sola El-Waylly, Jose Andres, Jet Tila, Ina Garten, Nigella Lawson, and Padma Lakshmi. Plus, co-hosts Christopher Kimball and Sarah Moulton do live calls with listeners and answer their questions about ingredients, techniques, and culinary mysteries. Like, why roasting a leg of lamb made one caller's oven explode? Ever wonder why your bread won't rise or your souffle falls flat? Chris and Sarah have the answers. You'll also hear from a rotating cast of contributors, including Kenji Lopez-Alt, Cheryl Day, Dan Pashman from The Sporkful, and Alex Ainuz, a French guy cooking from YouTube. Take a listen at 177milkstreet.com/radio or just search your podcast app for Milk Street Radio.